weeks and months, Bill. Just a brief one on this, because we know George Osborne this evening in an interview with the BBC is saying that when the referendum comes, that is it. It's going to be a once-in-a-lifetime decision. You can't vote no and then come back to it. Do you accept that? If the answer, Bill, is yes, Britain wants to stay, would you accept that that is it for a lifetime?
Well, I believe we're going to win, and the opinion polls are increasingly indicating that is the likely outcome. But having said that, there are uncertainties in any situation as big as this, and I simply believe that the fundamental question about who governs Britain and the importance for the voters of the United Kingdom, for the fact that at the moment we run a monumental trade deficit in goods and services with the European Union of £62 billion a year, and we have huge surpluses with the rest of the world saying the same goods and services. Quite apart from the question, which I think is fundamental, about whether or not when people are voting in the polling booth at general elections, they should be able to govern themselves through the laws that are made through their parliamentarians.
I want to bring in Sajjad Karim, listening to that. You can tell there, Sajjad, Bill Cash has got his script already. I mean, I don't detract from the force of his argument, but you've heard that. And the fact is that he may be right, that he can win this one. The polls are very finely balanced. Britain could say out of the EU.
Well, let me be absolutely clear about one thing, John, and this is something that I haven't come across a single person who's arguing for the UK to come out of the European Union as accepting, is this, that if the argument goes against me and the people of the United Kingdom decide that we're going to come out, I, for one, and many of my colleagues will absolutely accept that as being the decision and the position. And I just wish that those who are arguing for out could give the same respect to the British electorate that we are doing from our side. And the other thing that they need to be absolutely clear about is this, that this is not about the deal for them. People like myself are saying, yes, we need to improve the workings of the European Union. We need to make sure that our relationship is changed in ways so that it works better for us. So we want to examine what deal is feasible, how can that be delivered, and how soon can it be delivered. But for people who are putting the alternative argument, it is not about the deal. Even if the European Union was to change its name to the United Kingdom, swear allegiance to the Queen and adopt the pound, even that would not be good enough for them, and they should be honest about that.
Yeah, well, there's still quite an argument to be had. Let me just mention this, Justin, because this evening the London Mayor, Boris Johnson, he was asked what he thought of Chris Grayling's intervention in this EU debate in that article in The Telegraph. This is what Boris Johnson had to say to reporters.
Honest truth, haven't read it. Going to be honest with you, it looks very interesting article. I think the crucial thing that I've got the gist of what Chris is saying. He's totally right to say that unless you get change, unless you get reform, Europe will continue to be a zone of low growth and stagnation, and without a fundamentally different approach to legislation, you're going to have more and more bureaucratic interference of all kinds. Now, I am very confident that David Cameron has got the right ideas to sort it out and to get a good deal. And if you'll forgive me, I must go and make a speech, which I think it would be entirely prejudicial to any campaign to have me leading it.
Okay, well, and with that, Boris was off, and Kate McCann, senior political correspondent at The Telegraph, with me here. That was, well, I don't know, what do we make of that? You can always read too much between the lines of almost anything that anyone says, but we've heard Boris in the recent past talk about how Britain could prosper and grow and thrive outside the European Union, which sounded quite Eurosceptic. There, he was reining it all in a bit, wasn't he?
I think Boris is a funny one, though, isn't he? Because he often does this quite clever thing of sounding like he's quite, determined on an issue. And yes, he'd really like us to get a better deal. And if we don't, well, maybe we need to come out. But at the end of the day, he's always quite carefully on the side that perhaps is going to win. And I I think, despite what Bill says, actually, it's still highly likely that most of the UK will vote to stay in the European Union. And I think, Bill, you said something interesting when you were speaking just before. You said that the deal that we're going to get from the EU is not going to be good enough, and that therefore means that we should come out. Does that mean then that you have no confidence in your own leader? You don't have confidence in David Cameron's negotiating skills?
Well, in a nutshell, I mean, I said in the House of Commons when the negotiation package was announced that it was a pig in a poke. In other words, that we are being offered something without knowing really what it amounts to. But could I just give you a very good example, which came up today in the House of Commons, relating to the ports regulation. Now, we have 47 ports in the United Kingdom. About 350,000 people are directly involved in that ports industry. It is vital to the British economy. Yeah. And what has happened is that the European Union have brought forward a ports regulation opposed by every single port authority and all the relevant trade unions. It's opposed by the government, and it is opposed by a huge number of people from all sides of the political spectrum. Actually, that is still going ahead, although we did manage, the European Scrutiny Committee managed to force, with support of others, to actually have...
Bill, obviously you are a great man for fine print and fine detail, and so you should be.
About 350,000 people's jobs, John.
Indeed, no, I'm not belittling anything you're saying.
You that regulation, which is opposed by everybody, as I said in the House of Commons today, the government may wring their hands over it. They may cancel the committee they did the day before yesterday under pressure from us. But actually, they will end up with either majority voting or some seedy compromise, and that is what is a perfect reason why people should leave the European Union.
This is the substance of the argument. I don't detract from that for a second, but if we can just stick to the superficialities for a moment. Boris Johnson, are you hoping that he's going to be out there front and centre in the out campaign? Does that make a difference?
Well, I mean, I spoke to him last night about this.
What did he tell you?
But no, he's weighing the situation up in the context of the outcome of the negotiation.
Well, did he say he was still toying with the idea of campaigning to get out?
Well, I'm simply saying that he's in a position as Mayor of London. He is forming a judgment about the situation. I think he hopes the negotiations will have some traction. I don't agree with that at all, simply because it doesn't deal with the fundamental question of returning powers, as we've been repeatedly promised, as David Cameron himself said in the Bloomberg speech, that the Westminster democracy are the roots. The Westminster Parliament is the root of our democracy. And
let me just have a word. Let's get Sajjad Karim's take briefly. He's been listening to all of this. I mean, Sajjad, Bill Cash is raising very pertinent points about employment prospects in or out of the European Union. Financial and economic security is going to be one of the clinchers in this argument, isn't it? We know the big currents are going to be flowing, like concern over migration and so on. Another big current is going to be, are you better off? Is your job safer? Is that going to work for you?
Well, the issue that Bill is actually raising here is a point about subsidiarity. And this is something, actually, that we have already been working on a very real programme of reform within the European Union on to make sure that those decisions are taken at the appropriate level. And certainly within what the Prime Minister has raised for the reforms that he wishes to see, there is a very real chapter in there about delivering greater powers for national parliaments. Now, one of the things that we've already introduced in the last series of reforms that we delivered through the European Parliament was a yellow card mechanism that national parliaments...
Oh, come on.
No, Bill, please allow me to finish. Which allows for national parliaments to come forward and actually raise objections. Now, a number of...
You're not impressed, Bill, are you?
I'm not remotely. I do wish we could...
Have been very effective at actually using that process. Now, if Westminster is not using the processes already available to it, then that is an issue of reforming the way in which Westminster engages with Europe.
What about the yellow card, Bill?
Very, very simply, look, Chairman of the European Scrutiny Committee, I have responsibility on behalf of the House of Commons of dealing with this so-called yellow card business. Can I just tell you that actually, in order for it to operate, it's called a reasoned opinion. And in order to make it operate, you submit the proposal. You may challenge the question of whether it was done properly under the powers that the European Union have got. And when you challenge it, if a certain number of parliaments collectively agree, then the European Commission are meant to say, well, we'll abandon that. Well, we had an example which passed the threshold on the European Public Prosecutor. And do you know something? Having got past the threshold because enough of the member states, I think it's something like 12 or something, had actually passed the threshold and said that they didn't think it was appropriate, what does the European Commission do? They just carry on anyway.
Okay, Bill obviously not over-impressed with the European Commission, which is not the biggest breaking news I've ever heard, but it's going to be a lively debate. Thank you for joining us tonight, Bill Cash and also Sajjad Karim. Now, we also want to know this evening, how